Have you ever wondered why the love that once felt eternal suddenly begins to fade for no apparent reason? It doesn't scream. It doesn't end in an instant. It fades in silence, one gesture at a time. We try to save what's left, patch up words, force smiles. But something inside is already saying goodbye. And when the end finally comes, what hurts isn't just the absence of the other. It's realizing that, with them, a part of you left too. The part that only existed within that love. That's when the world changes shape. And in that emptiness, life makes its hardest invitation to stop chasing who left and start rediscovering who stayed. There are pains that don't ask for haste, and love is one of them. It leaves little by little, like a house being emptied. But what many don't realize is that sometimes love doesn't leave. It simply changes form, because loss, when accepted, stops being punishment and becomes passage. It's the moment when pain reveals what attachment had been hiding, and if you have the courage to look within, you'll realize that the end of a love is, in truth, the beginning of awareness. 3 great thinkers have helped us understand this passage. Erich Fromm, who taught that to love is an act of maturity, not dependence. Elisabeth Kübler-Ross, who showed that every ending is also a morning, a process of dying and being reborn within the same life. And Carl Jung, who revealed that by embracing pain and shadow, the human being reconnects with what is essential. This video is about that, about what happens when love goes away and everything that is born, in the silence it leaves behind. There comes a moment when love stops being a shelter and becomes a broken mirror. The person is still there, but something invisible has already gone. The touch no longer fits, the conversation feels empty, the gaze no longer recognizes. And it's in that silent instant that the soul understands what the body takes longer to accept. It's over. The pain of separation isn't just about losing the other. It's about losing yourself, as if part of your identity had been built inside that love. It's the beginning of the first death, the death of the us that no longer exists. Fromm explained that most people love in order to be loved, not to truly love. And when the bond ends, the mirror where the I saw itself shatters. Suddenly, you no longer know who you are without the other. Everything feels meaningless, as if the world had shifted out of place. But what truly changes is the way you see yourself. Loss reveals how much love was dependence, disguised as devotion. And it's in that collapse that true mourning begins, the mourning for oneself. It's strange to realize that the love that completed you was also hiding you. But that's when the opportunity arises to see yourself without projections. Without the other's reflection, you have to learn to look at yourself again. And that's the hardest step, because it requires facing the void. But it's within that void that reconstruction begins. Love has left, but something new is trying to be born. Something that, for now, has no name. After loss comes denial. The mind creates 1,000 ways to reverse the inevitable. Maybe if I had said it differently, if I had waited a little longer. Kübler-Ross said, this is the first stage of grief, denying the end in order to bear the pain. Even after goodbye, the mind insists on finding reasons to keep going. It sees signs where there are none, creates stories where only silence remains. It's the heart trying to rewrite what has already been erased. Denying is trying to stitch the past together with threads that have already broken. It's the instinct of someone who can't bear the emptiness. You revisit conversations, interpret glances, relive memories, as if you could find a loophole in fate. But the past doesn't return, and that's where suffering lingers. The mind creates a script where hope still exists. But that hope, when born from longing, is only a way of extending grief. And grief, when denied, turns into a prison. Idealization is the most dangerous veil of love. You don't miss the other person. You miss who you were beside them. You love the memory, not the reality. And the more you try to relive what's gone, the farther you drift from the present. Denial is sweet at first, but bitter in the end. It promises comfort, but delivers repetition. And sooner or later, the heart understands. Love doesn't return, and neither are you the same anymore. There comes a point when silence turns into a scream, and what was once sadness becomes anger, a force that seems to want to destroy everything, but in truth, only wants to be heard. Anger arises when love has nowhere left to exist. It's the unconscious screaming for recognition, a desperate attempt to regain a sense of control. You feel betrayed, wronged, used. But deep down, what hurts isn't the other person. It's the feeling of being left without an answer. And it's in that explosion that the unconscious begins to speak. Jung said that what we deny within ourselves turns into shadow, pain, and illness. And anger is precisely the voice of that forgotten part, the part that wanted to be loved, seen, validated. That's why it's so intense. It carries within it all the no's you never said. Every time you swallowed your truth to avoid losing someone, that energy stayed trapped inside. When love ends, that dam breaks. And what overflows isn't hatred, it's wounded love trying to survive. Hatred is love that has lost its form, but not its essence. Anger is uncomfortable because it reveals. It shows how much we idealized the other, how much power we gave them to hurt us. And that's why we often blame the other for a pain that was actually born within ourselves. Anger points to the mirror we avoid, the mirror of our own responsibility. It exposes what has yet to be understood, what still asks for forgiveness. And though it hurts, this is the moment when true self-knowledge begins. For Jung, the energy that destroys can also heal, if it is understood. It's the volcano that destroys, and then fertilizes the soil. Anger, when embraced, becomes movement, action, life. But when it's repressed, it rots, turning into resentment, irony, bitterness. So the challenge is not to get rid of anger, but to listen to it, without it burning or festering, to transform it into clarity, boundaries, truth. Because those who understand their own anger no longer need to hurt others to feel whole. And when the fury finally calms, the emptiness returns, but in a different way. No longer the emptiness of loss, but the space that precedes the new. It's the moment when the mind tries to negotiate with pain, believing there might still be a chance. A pact with the impossible. An attempt to persuade fate to turn back. This is the next stage. Self-deception. The last breath of the ego, before surrender. When pain disguises itself as hope, the heart creates the fantasy of maybe. If I change, maybe they'll come back. If I wait a little longer, maybe fate will regret it. It's the ego trying to negotiate with reality and calling it love. But what seems like love is often hope and fear. Fear of accepting that love has ended and that life goes on, even without the story the heart wanted to tell. It's the mind's last trick, before accepting the end. Fromm concluded that love is not something you earn, it is something you build. But when the bond ends, the ego tries to turn love into emotional bargaining. It promises to be better, calmer, more mature, anything but truthful. It's the attempt to buy back what was lost, as if love were a prize to be earned. But love isn't currency, it's presence. And every attempt to negotiate affection is just another way of escaping reality. Self-deception is the most dangerous reflection of heartbreak. It shows you what comforts you, not what truly exists. And while you try to fit into that reflection, you drift away from your own truth. The mind makes excuses, the heart convinces itself, and life goes on pause. But at some point, the disguise cracks, because pretending to be someone else to regain love is the same as losing yourself all over again. And love that requires disguise isn't love, it's fear. And fear, sooner or later, demands presence. When the illusion finally dissolves, what remains is silence, a silence that doesn't wound, but reveals. It's in that silence that pain turns into weariness, and weariness into surrender. It's when you stop fighting what is, and finally begin to feel. This is the beginning of the most feared and most necessary confrontation, the one where there's no longer escape or fantasy. It's the encounter with the fertile void. It's at this point that absence gains a new name: reality. Nothing needs to be invented, explained, or imagined anymore. What remains is the raw ground of existence, where there is no longer us, only me. But it is exactly there, right on that raw, damp ground, that the rebirth begins. Silent, slow, true, because emptiness, when accepted, stops being lack and becomes space. And that space is what prepares the heart for what comes next: the crossing through, the fertile void. After illusions shatter, silence arrives. Not the kind of silence that soothes, but the one that weighs, as if the world had lost its sound. Nothing stirs the same interest anymore. Colors seem faded, and even time moves slowly. It's the body trying to adapt to an absence it can't yet name. Kübler-Ross argued that this is where grief becomes real. It's the stage where no escape is possible, only confrontation with the void. And this void, though it feels like death, is the beginning of transformation. What we call a depressive state is often just the heart tired of resisting. The body stops, the mind quiets, and the soul asks for rest. It's not weakness. It's the deepest mechanism of healing. It's when life forces us to stop, chasing what's already gone. The problem is, we were taught to fear silence, to fill every space with noise. But it's within that space that consciousness begins to form. And those who have the courage to stay there discover what truly matters. Kübler-Ross said this is the point where pain stops being escape and becomes reality. And Jung would add, it's the moment when the unconscious offers, the symbol of the ego's death. The self that existed within the relationship no longer serves, and that hurts. But it's that very pain that digs the ground for the new to grow. When the heart stops fighting what it feels, it begins to understand what it means to be free. It teaches detachment, humility, and silence. And at the bottom of that silence, a new life begins to sprout. The depressive state isn't the end of the line. It's the interval between who you were and who you're becoming. It's the point where pride loses strength and the soul kneels before what is. You begin to see that the love that left didn't take everything. It left a calling to rebuild yourself without needing to be seen, approved, or saved. This is the part of grief where why becomes for what, and that simple shift is what transforms pain into meaning, because the bottom of the pit is also ground, and on it, firmness is born. Jung said that nothing becomes illuminated by imagining figures of light, but by making darkness conscious. That's what the fertile void represents, the night that prepares the dawn, the pain that purifies the gaze. It's in the moment when everything seems lost that the self begins to rediscover itself, because the love that once brought you down now teaches you how to stand. And when the heart finally accepts being alone, the void stops being absence and becomes shelter. It's the beginning of the rebirth of the self. Acceptance isn't giving up. It's stopping the fight against what has already happened. It's the moment when pain stops being the enemy and becomes part of the story. You realize that nothing you lived was lost. It all became soil. Fromm said that true love doesn't die. It changes form. And Jung added, what has been integrated no longer hurts. It only teaches. Acceptance is the moment when the soul stops searching for answers and begins to build meaning. Acceptance doesn't arrive suddenly. It creeps in slowly. One day, you wake up and realize that the other's name doesn't hurt as much. The memories still exist, but they've lost their weight. There's no more anger, no desire to return, only understanding. The pain doesn't disappear, but it changes place. It stops being an open wound and becomes a scar, a reminder that you survived what you once thought you couldn't. Fromm asserts that love is an act of giving, not possessing. And that's what acceptance teaches. To love without needing to hold on. True love isn't the one that holds on, but the one that frees both to be who they are. You understand that the other didn't come to complete you, but to reveal you. And by understanding that, something in you matures. A love is born that doesn't demand, doesn't beg, doesn't fear losing. A love that begins within, not outside. Jung states that by embracing the shadow and pain, the self reconfigures itself into something more authentic. It's the silent rebirth, the return to center. The mind stops searching for meaning and starts living it. Everything that once was loss is now learning. You're no longer the same, but you're whole for the first time. The heart no longer needs to be saved. It has learned to sustain itself, and it's from that wholeness that mature love is born. To accept is to realize that the end was never the end, only a form of beginning. The love that transforms into wisdom is the one that endures. And when you learn to love yourself, in the midst of silence, you discover there's no loneliness, only space. Space for the new, for the light, for the true. It's the point where love stops being need and becomes choice. And it's from that freedom that the next step is born, learning to love again. There comes a moment when the heart, tired of hurting, decides to breathe. It no longer wants to go back. It wants to understand. And it's in this new space, between the end and the beginning, that another kind of love is born. The one that doesn't come from need, but from awareness. Fromm explains that mature love is born when a human being learns to be alone without feeling lonely, because only those who rediscover themselves can truly surrender. To love again isn't to repeat, it's to be reborn. The love that is reborn after pain is quieter, more attentive. It no longer seeks to be completed, it seeks to share. It doesn't promise eternity, it offers presence. And the most beautiful thing is that it's born from those who thought they'd never love again. Because deep down, the heart truly learns only when it breaks. Each loss carves a deeper space within us, and it's in that space that true love finds shelter. Fromm states, immature love says, I love you because I need you. Mature love says, I need you because I love you. That's the difference between dependence and freedom. When love matures, it stops being a refuge and becomes a choice. You stop looking for someone to save you and start looking for someone with whom you can grow. Love then becomes a practice of expansion, not of lack. Learning to love again is, above all, learning to love yourself, not as an act of selfishness, but as a gesture of responsibility. You realize that the love you give to others is only the reflection of the love you hold within. And the more you know yourself, the more you know how to love without losing yourself. Love becomes a path, not a destination. It doesn't demand certainty, only presence. And it's in that simplicity that true fullness resides. The love that is born after the fall doesn't need to prove anything. It is calm, generous, lucid. It no longer seeks intensity. It seeks truth. And that truth is what leads you back to your center. It's the point where love stops being an encounter and becomes a state. Consciousness matures, the heart grows still, and the last step of this journey emerges, the reunion with your own center. After crossing through love, loss, and silence, something changes, not in a grand way, but subtly, like someone waking from a long sleep. Solitude, which once felt like punishment, now becomes companionship. The void no longer frightens, it embraces. Jung declared that the process of individuation is the return to the self, the psychic center that transcends the ego. And that's exactly what happens when love goes away. Life gives you back the task of loving yourself enough, not to lose yourself again. Finding your own center isn't isolating from the world. It's returning to dwell within your own soul. It's realizing that nothing external can define or sustain you completely. The other can inspire, touch, accompany, but never replace. When you understand this, solitude stops being absence and becomes presence. You learn to be with yourself with the same tenderness you once reserved for someone else. And it's in that simple, almost imperceptible gesture that rebirth is fulfilled. You stop searching for love and begin to be love. Jung said that everything we deny in ourselves dominates us, but everything we accept becomes strength. By integrating your shadows, you discover there is no light without darkness. Suffering doesn't disappear. It changes its function. It stops hurting and begins to teach. Pain becomes wisdom, and the void becomes a source of meaning. This is how the human being matures, not by fleeing pain, but by walking through it consciously. The reunion with your own center is the return to the essential. The mind grows quiet, the heart aligns, and the soul finds rest. You understand that true freedom isn't being without bonds. It's living without dependencies. Love continues to exist, but now it flows from the inside out. It's the kind of love that doesn't demand a response, because it's already whole. It's the love that never ends, because it's born from a place that lacks nothing. The center is the point, where the self and life begin to breathe together again. And when this reunion happens, the world changes color. Not because everything became perfect, but because you learn to see. Absence becomes gratitude. The end turns into passage, and love transforms into consciousness. Loss showed you the way back home, and that home is you. Now, nothing needs to be proven. Nothing needs to be possessed. You exist with lightness, with presence, with truth, and the journey begins again, not with another love, but with a new way of seeing. So, after all, what is the right way to love? Maybe the right kind of love isn't the one that never hurts, but the one that teaches us how to remain whole, even after pain. To love rightly is to love with awareness, without needing the other to save you, without turning affection into dependence. It's choosing to be there, not out of need, but out of presence. Mature love doesn't ask for guarantees. It accepts risk because it knows that the fear of suffering is the same fear that keeps us from living. And that's why true love is always an act of courage. To love is to strip away control and trust in truth, even when it doesn't comfort you. But how can you stop being a hostage to the fear of loving again after being hurt? By recognizing that fear isn't the enemy, it's the guardian of what still needs healing. The mistake is letting it take control. When you listen to it, but don't bow to it, love begins to flow again. Because the heart that has learned through loss isn't weak. It's wise. It understands that every ending is just life's way of bringing you closer to who you truly are. And it's in that maturity that love stops being a promise and becomes presence. But human beings still look for shortcuts. We prefer comforting illusions over truths that set us free. We create stories to avoid feeling, invent certainties to escape the void, And that's when love becomes confused with relief, and relief disguises itself as truth. In the next step of this journey, we'll dive into this subtle mechanism, into how the ego creates beautiful lies, so that we can keep existing within them, not to judge the deception, but to understand the pleasure of being deceived. If this video moved you in any way, you'll find in the comments the ebooks that dive deeper into everything we've discussed here, for those who wish to support this project and help bring more reflections like this to the world. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video. And tell me in the comments, do you love today by choice, or still out of fear of being alone? Your answer might be the mirror. Someone else needs to start setting themselves free. In the end, love isn't the opposite of pain. It's what gives it meaning. And maybe true awakening happens when you realize that the love you were searching for in someone else was always the love the universe was trying to teach you to feel for yourself.